Coming up on The World Today. The United Kingdom approves the use of Oxford's AstraZeneca vaccine. British Parliament backs the government's post-Brexit trade deal with the EU. Plus, deadly attack at Yemen's Aden airport leaves at least 13 people dead. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has been approved for use in the UK, with the first doses due to be given on Monday amid rising coronavirus cases. The UK has ordered 100 million doses, enough to vaccinate 50 million people. Now, this comes as millions more people in England are expected to be placed under the toughest Tier 4 restrictions.
The hospitals across the country are ready, but we can also use this vaccine in primary care. We can take it to care homes. It just needs normal fridge temperature rather than the -70 super cold storage that the Pfizer vaccine requires. So we'll get going on this from Monday.
Our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, joins us now for more. Juliana, welcome to the program.
Good evening.
So this vaccine approval comes after Public Health England said the country was facing unprecedented levels of infections and amid concerns about the increasing pressure on the NHS. So how are Britons reacting? Are people eager to receive it, especially with the new fast-spreading variant?
Well, it's difficult to answer that question because we're going through a very a strange period here in the UK. As you said, the COVID-19 infections are way off. Just before I came into the studio, actually, we got yesterday's COVID-19 death rate, which has peaked to 981 deaths. Now, this is more than 100% on the previous day's infections, which I believe were about 400. And we also had over 50,000 positive COVID cases. So we're definitely well into the peak of the second wave. And if you or any of our viewers are listening to British media at the moment, you will know that health practitioners up and down the country are literally screaming out, saying that they are overwhelmed with the amount of patients that they're having. In fact, in some areas, they're saying they're receiving more patients than others. But yes, this Oxford AstraZeneca vaccination is a really positive news story. But whether or not people are happy about it, only time will tell. As you know, as everybody knows, there is a lot of suspicion about vaccine. There's been a huge media campaign. The government have been rolling in celebrities to try and encourage people to take the vaccine. But the first people that are going to be getting it are the elderly, are key workers and critical workers, and they're pretty happy that they will be free from COVID.
Well, Juliana, more areas of England will be placed under the Tier 4 restrictions from midnight. So what does this mean? What does this measure mean and what does it include? And are there plans to ease measures for New Year's Day like we saw on Christmas Day?
No, there are no measures to ease. And yes, even Christmas, as we all know and remember, it was U-turned unless you were in other parts of the country. But basically, the entirety of England will be in some sort of lockdown. Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, has literally just left the dispatch box after giving his statement. Tier 4 basically resembles a national lockdown. All non-essential stores are closed, including restaurants, retail stores. The message of stay at home is being really blurted out. And so another 16 million people have been placed into Tier 4. The rest of the country is in Tier 3, so they can still go and shop for clothes, but they cannot meet loved ones and they cannot go into the hospitality sector. It's pretty an alarming situation, actually, and it's rolling news, and this story is still developing. One of the main talking points at the moment is what is going to happen to school children after the mass fallout of disparities in incomes of people over the last spring term. So many young children just didn't have access to technology and were unable to keep up with their studies. Britain did vow to keep children in schools, but now because of this new variant, and we know that it does seem to be reaching children much more speedily than it did before, Gavin Williamson has said that school children will not be returning next week. University students that are supposed to be going back to school, that's now going to be delayed. So it's a pretty grim time, even though there were celebrations in the Commons chambers because of this Brexit deal. The fact that we've just recorded 981 deaths in a single day really does bring us back to those dark days in April. And there are some that are wondering if indeed the second wave of COVID will be worse than the first wave.
Well, we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on the situation there. Juliana, please do stay safe.
Thank you.
While marking a year since the first cases of the novel coronavirus were reported by China, the head of the World Health Organization has urged countries to ensure that vaccines are made available to people at risk everywhere, not just in rich nations. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus appealed for $4 billion to buy COVID-19 vaccines for distribution in lower and middle-income countries through the COVAX vaccine facility. He also urged countries to combat conspiracy theories and attacks on science.
Vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics have been developed and rolled out at record speed, thanks to collaborations including the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator. Equity is the essence of the ACT Accelerator, and its vaccine arm, COVAX, which has secured access to 2 billion doses of promising vaccine candidates. Vaccines offer great hope to turn the tide of the pandemic. But to protect the world, we must ensure that all people at risk everywhere, not just in countries who can afford vaccines, are immunized.
Meanwhile, Turkey has begun testing samples from the first shipment of COVID-19 vaccines from China's Sinovac today. That's according to a statement from the country's health ministry. Here's more on this and other stories in our global COVID update.
The first batch of vaccines, which arrived in the capital Ankara early on Wednesday, was loaded from airplanes and onto trucks at the capital's Esenboga airport and taken to the storage facilities of the health ministry. Video released by the ministry showed authorities opening boxes and taking random samples to send to laboratories for the testing process, which will take 14 days. On Twitter, Health Minister Fahrettin Koca said authorities would begin inoculations after the testing process is completed. Meanwhile, German Health Minister Jens Spahn has called for a thorough and quick examination of the AstraZeneca vaccine by the European Medicines Agency, in addition to the expected clearance of a shot from Moderna in early January. Germany expects the European Union to give rapid approval to the coronavirus vaccine developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca that was cleared for use in Britain on Wednesday. Federal and regional leaders are due to convene in the new year to discuss whether to extend lockdown measures imposed before Christmas that are due to remain in force until at least January 10th. In Spain, the vaccination of nursing home residents and health workers is underway after Pfizer postponed the delivery of a new batch of the coronavirus vaccine by 1 day due to a logistics hurdle related to the control of temperature in the process of loading and sending out the vaccines. The Amava Izar nursing home in Madrid was one of the facilities affected by the delay, and both staff and residents were keen to restart the inoculation process on Wednesday.
Had 18 cases of community transmission.
Finally, Australian authorities restricted movement and tightened curbs on gatherings in Sydney on Wednesday, hoping to avoid a coronavirus super spreader event during the city's New Year's Eve celebrations after detecting a new cluster of cases. Household gatherings were limited to just 5 people, while the maximum number of people allowed to gather in public was capped at 30. New South Wales reported 18 new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday, the biggest daily increase in a week.
The Croydon cluster demonstrates what happens when there are larger family gatherings and how it only takes one person in that family gathering to give it to everybody else in the family. And we want to see a reduction of that. We don't want New Year's Eve to be the cause of a super spreader. Had circumstances been different, we may have acted differently, but we don't want New Year's Eve to be a situation where undetected cases, people who may be in the very early stages of the disease and not know they've got it, not know they're infectious, unintentionally give it to those closest to them.
The outbreaks in Sydney have dampened the city's New Year's Eve harbour fireworks display, an event televised around the world.
Away from the coronavirus pandemic, British members of parliament have overwhelmingly approved the UK's post-Brexit trade deal with the EU in a parliamentary vote. A bill bringing the deal into UK law was backed by the Commons by 521 to 73 votes after Parliament was recalled. The majority of the Labour MPs are thought to have voted for the agreement after leader Sir Keir Starmer said, quote, a thin deal was better than no deal. The UK will sever its ties with the EU on Thursday, 4.5 years after the Brexit referendum. The agreement, hammered out with Brussels over 9 months, sets out a new business and security relationship between the UK and its biggest trading partner. Immigration lawyer Dio Fadina joins us now from London for more on this. Dio, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
So, the EU's future relationship bill is being rushed through Parliament in a single day and is set to become law late on Wednesday once it has received royal assent. What do you make of this, and are there more fears that some loopholes could be missed?
Oh, thank you very much. What the country has actually been through in the last, 4.5 years, the precarity and the precipice possibility of crashing out of the EU, roughly about a month ago. The fact that that's now been addressed is a good thing. But alas, I fear that just one day dedicated to debating this very particular bill regarding leaving the EU. I don't believe that one day is enough, and I fear that what would happen is there will be so many loopholes, regarding this very particular bill that have not been looked into properly and debated properly. Examples are, the financial services, which is not part of this deal. And it's going to be costing the UK so much in terms of financial services. And they would have to now, every year we look at roughly well over about 300 billion, of funds, tradings, assets, and others in between the EU and the UK. That, I fear, has not been looked into properly. We also have the issue of security. The sharing security in between the UK and the EU, that is also not part of the deal. So all these things have not been looked into properly. And I fear that this could sooner or later come back to haunt us. The saying that when you do things in a hurry, you repent at leisure. I feel that could be the case in the future with this deal being approved.
Sever its ties with the EU on Thursday, just 4.5 years after the Brexit referendum. So, there's no turning back now, is there? What major changes will we see once the clock strikes 11 p.m. on Thursday?
Oh, well, there's no turning back now. The bill has actually been passed into law in Parliament, and I strongly believe that the EU would be doing the same. But what we are going to be seeing on Thursday, there will be a total change of circumstances. If you want to actually travel to Europe, you would now need to at least lay out what you are going to go and do in Europe. You cannot be in Europe for more than between 3 and 6 months. Medical insurance would be going up because in the past, your medical insurance would have been covered because you're part of the EU. There would also be a situation where if you truly and really want to, go to Europe, or anybody coming from Europe to the UK, there will be things that were not really in place in the past that we now need to, we would have to abide by. There's also this situation, the fact that we are now leaving the EU. There are still some nations within the UK, that are not particularly happy. Scotland is a very, very good example of that very particular nation, because they voted 43% to remain in the EU. This would, I would believe, force a situation where the Scottish Parliament, maybe after next year's elections, would move for another referendum for them to leave the UK, because they've always wanted to be part of the EU. So these are a few changes that could be occurring on Monday, when indeed we eventually leave the EU.
All right, well, Dayo, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some more clarity on the situation there.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Still to come on the program. COVID-19 patients in Moscow recover with yoga. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. A series of powerful aftershocks have rocked central Croatia following a 6.4 magnitude earthquake on Tuesday. The new 4.8 and 4.7 magnitude tremors caused further damage to buildings. This comes as rescuers searched the rubble in dozens of villages near Prechinja overnight, but no new victims were found. At least 7 people are known to have died in Tuesday's quake. At least 13 people have been killed in an attack at the airport in Yemen's second city of Aden as the new government arrived from Saudi Arabia. Security sources and medics say there was at least one explosion as ministers were preparing to disembark. Prime Minister Mayin Abdul Malik Saeed says he and his cabinet are fine. Information Minister Muammar al-Irani accused the rebel Houthi movement of carrying out what he called a cowardly terrorist act. Yemen has been devastated by a conflict that escalated in 2015 when a Saudi-led coalition of Arab states launched a military operation to defeat the Houthis and restore President Arabu Mansour Hadi's rule. The fighting has reportedly left more than 110,000 people dead. It has triggered the world's worst humanitarian disaster, with millions on the brink of famine, and left the country even more vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, Indian security forces say they have gunned down 3 militants in the volatile Jammu and Kashmir territories. The Indian Army, local police, and Parliamentary Central Reserve Police Force launched a joint operation on the outskirts of summer capital Srinagar after receiving information about the presence of militants in a house near a private hospital. There has been a spate of anti-militant operations in Kashmir this month, with 2 militants killed in an encounter that took place in Waningam area last week. Officials say Indian security forces have killed over 200 militants in Kashmir this year, many from groups allegedly backed by Pakistan. However, Islamabad denies providing material support for militants in Kashmir. At least 15 people are feared dead in Papua New Guinea after a landslide buried them. The victims, including 3 children, were asleep in a longhouse near a mine where they had been panning for gold when the landslide buried the hut in the Gwaila district of PNG's Central Province. Only 2 bodies have been recovered so far, with locals working with shovels and pitchforks to dig through the debris. Officials say heavy rains, which may have triggered the landslide, and the remote location, reachable only by helicopter or a 2-hour walk, have hampered the recovery effort. And in the Middle East, a former U.S. Navy analyst who served 30 years in prison for spying for Israel has relocated to the Jewish state. He was welcomed with a prayer of thanksgiving by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. 66-year-old Jonathan Pollard has long voiced a desire to emigrate to Israel, which granted him citizenship. The espionage affair strained U.S.-Israel relations for decades. Sentenced in 1987 to life imprisonment after he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage, Pollard was freed on parole in 2015. The Ugandan opposition presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, popularly known as Bobby Wine, says he has been arrested along with his entire campaign team. But the police have not yet commented on the arrest. Bobby Wine is seen as the strongest challenger to President Yoweri Museveni, who is seeking re-election 35 years after he came to power. At least 50 people were killed in November following protests at Bobby Wine's detention on charges of breaking coronavirus restrictions. And finally on the program, let's take you to Russia, where coronavirus patients are taking advantage of healing benefits of yoga. Moscow's Yoga Praktika Club launched a new yoga program for post-COVID rehabilitation on Christmas Eve. Take a look.
Moscow Yoga Praktika Club launched on December 24th a new yoga program for post-COVID rehabilitation. Participants split into groups of up to 10 people performing soft exercises and concentrating on their breathing and avoiding overexertion. According to the club's founder and director, the new training program was taken from previous ones aimed at post-pneumonia rehabilitation, but was significantly simplified and adapted for a wider group of the population.
We have regular classes that deal with breathing, opening the chest. This is not the first time we participate in a grant from the Moscow department. This is a social project. We already have a lot of experience in this. We worked with other groups of the population too, and now it is such a wide program. We invite everyone who has been infected with coronavirus. We already have extensive experience in rehabilitation after lung inflammation, so we decided to organize this class.
Yoga, a group of physical, mental, and spiritual practices which originated in ancient India approximately 5,000 years ago, was introduced to the West at the end of the 19th century. Modern yoga is widely spread as an adaptation of ancient tradition that consists of posture-based physical fitness, stress relief, and relaxation technique. Last Friday, Russia reported 29,018 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours, including 7,315 in Moscow, taking the national total to 2,992,706 since the pandemic began. Authorities say 563 had died in the last 24 hours, pushing the official death toll to 53,659.
Well, thanks so much for staying with us for this half hour. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.